Number 9. Pontiac Ventura. Nobody expected Pontiac to build a compact car. The division had spent the 1960s establishing itself as the performance brand of General Motors, the GTO, the Firebird, the wide-track identity that separated Pontiac from Chevrolet in the showroom and on the street. Then the 1971 Ventura arrived on the X-Body platform it shared with the Chevrolet Nova, priced below $3,000 in base form, and confirmed that the oil crisis and the American compact market were going to require Pontiac to build a different kind of car than the one it had been famous for. The Ventura was available as a two-door coupe, a three-door hatchback, and a four-door sedan, the configuration that most families chose because it fit what a compact needed to be in the first half of the decade. Its inline-six and small-block V8 options gave it the same drivetrain choices available in the Nova, which is to say, it offered the mechanical durability that the X-Body platform had documented across 2 decades of Chevrolet production. Number 8. Pontiac Catalina. Before every American police chase scene you watched in the 1970s, the car doing the chasing was usually this one. The Pontiac Catalina was the entry-level full-size B-body, the configuration below the Bonneville in price and interior refinement and above everything else in the Pontiac lineup in terms of fleet volume, police package availability, and taxi company preference. Law enforcement agencies across the country purchased pursuit-rated Catalinas in numbers sufficient to make the car a constant and specific presence in American rearview mirrors throughout the decade. The Catalina's combination of B-body structural integrity, V8 engine options from 400 to 455 cubic inches, and Pontiac dealer network coverage made it the fleet administrator's default answer to the question of what a large, durable vehicle should be at the lowest available price from the division. The 1972 Catalina sedan was the configuration that most fleet and private buyers chose, the four-door, bench-seat, turbo-hydromatic automatic that accumulated commercial mileage without the fatigue that smaller platforms generated. Number 7. Pontiac Bonneville. If you made it to the Bonneville, you had arrived. The Pontiac Bonneville sat above the Catalina in the full-size lineup, same B-body platform, more interior content, more chrome, more of the specific visual vocabulary that told the American neighbor across the street that the family who owned it had made deliberate decisions about which Pontiac they were going to drive. American neighborhoods of the 1970s contained Bonnevilles in proportions that reflected the size of the decade's middle class and the specific aspiration that the Bonneville represented, the car above what you needed and within reach of what you could justify. The Bonneville's four-door sedan configuration was the choice for the family that needed 6-passenger interior, trunk space, and the highway comfort that the full-size B-body's ride isolation provided on long drives. Its optional velour interior, power accessories, and the weight of its door handles communicated a level of care that the Catalina's fleet specification intentionally omitted.
Number 6. Pontiac Grand Prix. Personal luxury. That was the phrase Detroit invented in the 1970s to describe a category of cars it created to capture the buyer who wanted something that felt expensive without being a Cadillac. The Pontiac Grand Prix was one of the most commercially successful answers to that premise in the decade. The 1973 redesign placed the Grand Prix on the A-body special platform with a waterfall grille and bucket seat interior that communicated style distinction the standard A-body intermediates did not. American buyers responded with production numbers that peaked at more than 288,000 units in 1977, the highest single-year Grand Prix total in the nameplate's history. The Grand Prix's position in the personal luxury segment gave it a buyer profile distinct from the Catalina and the Bonneville, the single professional, the couple without children, the buyer who commuted in a car that said something about how they had decided to spend their money. The waterfall grille and formal roofline were the visual argument the Grand Prix made in every parking lot it occupied. The Grand Prix is at number 6 because 250,000 Americans chose one in 1977 alone, the decade's clearest confirmation that personal luxury at an accessible price was the most bankable automotive promise.
Number 5. Pontiac Le Mans. The Pontiac Le Mans outsold the GTO every year of the 1970s. That fact is not widely discussed because the GTO has collected decades of cultural memory and the Le Mans has collected almost none. But the mid-size A-body Le Mans was the Pontiac that the American family actually bought in the early years of the decade. The four-door sedan or the coupe that sat between the Ventura and the full-size Catalina and offered the mid-size interior dimensions that American households needed when the Ventura was slightly too small and the Catalina was slightly more than the situation required. In 1973, the Le Mans received the Colonnade restyling, pillarless hardtop lines on a more structurally rigid body, a compromise that federal safety standards had made necessary. The base Le Mans and the Le Mans Sport gave buyers two levels of visual ambition in the same basic package, the workhorse midsize and the slightly more dressed version. Both served the family that had decided a midsize was the right size. The Le Mans is at number 5 because it was the Pontiac that appeared most consistently in the school pickup line, the supermarket lot, and the Saturday errand context that defined what the American midsize family car looked like in practice. Number 4. Pontiac Grand Am. The Pontiac Grand Am built for drivers who wanted a European sports sedan without leaving the Pontiac dealer. The 1973 Grand Am arrived with a Euro-influenced cockpit, a wood-rimmed steering wheel, a turbo-hydromatic with a floor-mounted shifter, and a handling suspension tuned to European standards that Pontiac's engineers had benchmarked against BMW and Mercedes during development. The result was a car that Motor Trend and Car and Driver both praised as the most competent handler in the American intermediate segment, and that American buyers chose in sufficient numbers to make 1973 the first and largest production year. The Grand Am's 3-year first-generation run ended with the 1975 model year, a victim of the same financial and regulatory pressures that reshaped the entire intermediate market. It returned for 1978 in a revised configuration, but the original 1973 to 1975 Grand Am represents Pontiac at its most specific, a car built to answer a question that European manufacturers had been asking of American buyers, at a price that the American budget could accommodate.
Number 3. Pontiac Firebird. The Trans Am poster was on every teenager's bedroom wall in the 1970s. The Firebird in the school parking lot was usually something else. The base Firebird coupe and the Esprit, the trim levels that occupied the lower half of the F-body lineup below the Formula and the Trans Am, were the configurations that the majority of Pontiac Firebird buyers drove home from the dealer. Priced at the accessible end of the pony car market, the base Firebird offered the second-generation F-body's long hood, short deck proportions and fastback roofline in a package that the buyer who wanted the styling without the performance premium could afford. Pontiac produced the Firebird across the entire decade, surviving a near cancellation in 1972 and reaching its sales peak in the final years as the Trans Am's cultural prominence drove traffic to every configuration the nameplate offered. The buyers who came in for the Trans Am and left with the base Firebird or the Esprit outnumbered the ones who completed the transaction in the showroom. Number 2. Pontiac Phoenix. The 1973 oil crisis changed what American buyers needed from a car. The 1979 fuel shock confirmed it. The Pontiac Phoenix arrived for 1977 as the replacement for the Ventura, still on the X-body platform it shared with the Chevrolet Nova, refined in its exterior and interior specification to position it as the compact that buyers who were downsizing from mid-size and full-size Pontiacs could choose without feeling they had made a sacrifice. American buyers who had been driving Le Mans and Bonneville since the early part of the decade found themselves, by 1977 and 1978, making exactly that calculation. The Phoenix's 4-door sedan was the configuration most buyers chose, a practical compact that returned fuel economy numbers the decade's energy climate had made the primary purchase criterion, carrying a Pontiac badge that let buyers remain in the brand's network while choosing a smaller car. It represented the shift that the decade's two fuel crises had made permanent, the realization that the full-size default assumption no longer matched the operating conditions American roads and gasoline prices had imposed. Number 1. Pontiac Trans Am. In June 1977, Smokey and the Bandit opened in American theaters. Burt Reynolds drove a black and gold 1977 Pontiac Trans Am across the American South in a story that had almost no plot and no complication that the car could not resolve at full throttle. The film grossed $300 million worldwide. By 1979, Pontiac was building 93,349 Trans Ams annually, the highest production figure the nameplate ever recorded. The car that had been a low-volume performance variant became the most visible automobile in America because a film had made it the object that American popular culture decided to desire. The Trans Am's position at number 1 reflects a fact about the 1970s that the decade's car culture confirmed. The line between the car people desired and the car people actually owned collapsed by the end of the decade. The 1977 Trans Am was not a concept or a collector's special. It was a production car available at every Pontiac dealer in the country, and American buyers purchased it in numbers that placed it in more driveways, more parking lots, and more American memories than any other Pontiac built in the decade.